Welcome to the Great Basin Smoke Dispersion Briefing for Monday, November 2nd. This is Gina McGuire. Over the last 7 days, we have seen spotty precipitation across most of the Great Basin, with heavier amounts of wetting rains and higher elevation snowfall over the central Idaho mountains. Further south, we have seen again more spotty precipitation, especially in the higher elevations. As you can see from the image on the right, most areas have seen below normal precipitation for this 7-day period, with the exception of, again, the mountain areas of Nevada and Utah, and especially the central Idaho mountains. If we look at the satellite image for this morning, we see a strong area of low pressure dropping south along the west coast, and this will swing eastward through the Great Basin over the next couple of days and provide widespread wetting rains and snowfall, especially in the higher elevations, but we also will see snow levels occasionally drop to valley floors, especially today across Nevada and Idaho. Also ahead of this area of low pressure, we'll see stronger winds today and Tuesday, mainly across Utah and into parts of southwest Wyoming and far eastern Nevada. Also associated with this area of low pressure, we'll see very cold temperatures across the Great Basin, where high temperatures will likely reach 10 to 15 degrees below normal in most areas across Nevada and Utah, and up to 5 to 8 degrees below normal further north. Now as we look at ventilation index across the Great Basin, which is a combination of transport winds in the horizontal and mixing height in the vertical. On this index, you'll notice that the areas of white over the southern and eastern portions of the Great Basin are showing a very high ventilation index, providing good ventilation, which is mainly attributed to the strong winds we're seeing out ahead of this area of low pressure. Further north and west, where we'll likely see more precipitation today, and lower mixing heights, we're also seeing lighter winds and generally a lower ventilation index. If we break this into its components, today the very strong winds again are over the southern half of Nevada into Utah, and this is evident on the transport wind map, with lighter winds further north and west. Also, mixing heights are quite a bit higher over the eastern half of the Great Basin, and much lower where we're seeing much cooler temperatures and rainfall and lighter winds over western and northern Nevada into Idaho. If we look at Tuesday, this area of low pressure moves further east over central portions of the Great Basin, with that wetting rain and snowfall moving now eastward across much of the eastern half of the Great Basin. Also, the ventilation index improves with good ventilation in most areas, with the exception of parts of southeast Idaho and the mountainous areas of northern Utah into Nevada. Again, looking at the individual components, transport winds, you can see the winds are increasing really across the Great Basin, with the strongest southwest winds now over eastern Utah. However, as this area of low pressure moves east, the wind flow switches to the northwest over Idaho and western Nevada, and also winds will be increasing on the backside of that area of low pressure. Looking at mixing heights, the highest mixing heights are with those stronger southwest winds over the eastern half of Utah, with much lower mixing heights as we go further north into Idaho and Nevada. If we look now further ahead at Wednesday, this area of low pressure moves further east into the Four Corners area and Colorado and New Mexico. However, we still are seeing more moisture move into the northern portion of the Great Basin, with a wind shift to northwest winds in all areas. Looking at the ventilation index, we are seeing much lower ventilation index over parts of western and northern Nevada into Idaho, but still good ventilation index over parts of southern and eastern Nevada into Utah. Again, looking at the individual components, the winds are decreasing by Wednesday across the Great Basin, but are still somewhat breezy over parts of the eastern and southern half of Nevada into Utah and Idaho, again with generally north to northwest winds. Mixing heights will remain generally low across Idaho and northern Nevada, but still remain fairly high over the southern half of the Great Basin. Now looking at the clearing index for Utah across the area, you can see generally a high clearing index over most of the southern two-thirds of Utah, with the exception of the far north today, and again that increases as we move through Tuesday. However, as the area of low pressure moves further east by Wednesday, we will see a decrease in the clearing index from northwest to southeast across Utah. Now looking at the overall forecast amount of precipitation from Monday through Wednesday, you can see significant amounts of precipitation across parts of southeast Idaho into the northern half of Nevada and the Sierra, with a little bit less precipitation further east across Utah, with the highest amounts in Utah mainly in the higher elevations. We'll also see higher elevation snowfall accumulation, as well as some snowfall down to the valley floors at times as colder air with the area of low pressure moves across the Great Basin. Looking later in the week, on Thursday, this trough of low pressure moves well to the east. We still have some lingering moisture over parts of the northern areas of the Great Basin, and also winds will shift to the northwest in all areas. This will decrease ventilation, mainly across Nevada and Utah. However, still high indices for ventilation index over parts of Idaho and the eastern side of Utah. Looking into Friday, drier and warmer conditions are expected, however temperatures will still remain well below normal. Also, winds under a weak ridge of high pressure will be fairly light across the Great Basin, and this will allow for fairly weak dispersion in most, if not all, areas. Another area of low pressure off the California coast will approach and move into parts of western Nevada on Saturday. This may bring some moisture with some cloud cover or even very light shower activity to the western half of Nevada into western Idaho. However, still fairly weak dispersion across the Great Basin due to lighter winds and lower mixing heights. As we move into Sunday, this area of low pressure moves well to the east, and we start to see another area of low pressure drop into the Pacific Northwest, and this will allow for increased moisture and some showers across mainly Idaho into far northern Nevada, northern Utah, and into western Wyoming. Also, winds will start increasing across Idaho for a little bit more dispersion across those areas, however, still fairly light winds and low ventilation index across Nevada and Utah. Looking at the overall forecast amount of precipitation from Thursday through early Saturday morning, you can see generally light amounts of precipitation up mainly across Idaho into western Wyoming and far northern Utah, with drier conditions further south after the significant precipitation we see early this week. Looking towards the middle of November, we'll generally see below normal temperatures and also possibly above normal precipitation across parts of the northern areas of the Great Basin. That concludes our briefing for today. This briefing will be updated on Wednesday and will be issued every Monday and Wednesday throughout the off-season. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Thank you for listening.